Well, my name is Barbara Coward. It's an honor to be here and to chat with you today. I have been in this industry or space for decades. I've worked in a whole bunch of different roles, from being an admissions officer, business schools in the UK, and then also here in the US, covering a range of programs from full-time MBA to part-time MBA to executive MBA, MSF, Masters of Finance programs, you name it. And I've done all that. So I've been on the kind of the inside, so to speak, behind the curtain of applying to business school. And then I've also worked with a bunch of different schools, helping them with marketing and recruiting students and going to recruiting fairs for them. So I'm the person that people can ask, like, okay, what do I do when I go up to a table pre-pandemic or when this pandemic is over and have a question? What kind of things do I was in a situation once, I remember in New York fair, somebody came up and I said, well, what do you want to do? It's like, I don't know. I was like, okay, that's not the answer. You need to, it's okay with me, but don't say that to the admissions committee. And so then I built on that and then started working with prospective students applying to schools, where I would bring in all that experience I have on the school side to help advise them applying to schools. And I love it because I get to see the industry as a whole. I'm not just representing one school. I can help guide people and say, hey, I'm going to apply to 5 schools. Which ones should I consider? And then also, talk about their messaging as well and how to present themselves. I always kind of say that I feel like I'm a lawyer. It's like, you give me what you have. We can't go back and change a GPA from undergrad, for example. But we'll take what we have and make the best case forward. And I think one of the missed opportunities, there are a lot of people in the space doing what I do, and there's some really fantastic people and people with, MBAs from Stanford and Harvard and all of that. There's a lot of talent out there. One of the things that I do is I really look at it from the perspective of being inside, behind the curtain. So, because I've done that. And I did that most recently when I did some admissions work for Johns Hopkins School of International Studies, where, you get up in the morning, you get your coffee, you log on, and you have to click on, you see a ton of applications and you're like, which one should I click on first? And you're going through them. So I know what that decision-making process is like. And I always say the biggest job you have to do as an applicant is help them make a decision. Now, you want them to make the right decision, admitting you can't control that. There's there's school and university kind of objectives and maybe targets they're trying to reach, et cetera. But what you can do, what you have control over, is presenting a very clear and compelling message or presentation of who you are and how you would take advantage of the program and what you would do afterwards. It's basically creating that vision. And so that's really what my I spend a lot of time doing with applicants at all sorts of stages in the admissions journey, from just applying initially to being on a wait list. I helped somebody yesterday with the wait list strategy, just really from a strategic kind of, again, are you going in front of the court and the court of admissions of the admissions officers? Yeah, it's a really, there are a lot of questions to ask. It's a different experience. The schools will say it's the same degree. It doesn't matter if you go to Kellogg and do, the evening and weekend program or the full-time program, it's a Kellogg MBA. But the just learning environment is really different in what you're hoping to get out of it too. Actually, I will say that on top of that, I've actually had the experience of doing both. I started my MBA on a part-time basis in Boston when I was working full-time. And then moved abroad, and then I finished it, although I didn't have my credits transferred, so I had to do it over again on a full-time basis. So I've had that personal experience of doing both. And I can say that if you are somebody who likes your job or likes earning a living, earning income, so to speak, and you don't want to give that up and you're super risk adverse or whatever, a part-time program is great. You continue to get your paycheck, you continue to go to work, and you learn, on the evenings, the weekends, or whatever format that may be. Not the downside, but the challenge is there's a lot on your plate. All of a sudden you have not only school time and classes, but you have studying, team meetings, on top of everything else. So I remember, for example, back in the day when I did it, classes were 6 or 7 to 9 p.m. And I was in Boston and it snows and it's cold in January in Boston. And I had to get my car and, drive to and park in the snow and all of that and get to class. Again, today there's a lot more, hybrid and remote learning options as well. But, then you come back and it's late at night, then you have to get up early to go to work. Whereas a full-time program, you are just fully immersed in it. Like it's like, I hate to say I don't want to trivialize it by saying it's like summer camp, but it's like you're away, you've taken a pause on everything else and you're fully immersed. And so if you're somebody who can juggle a bunch of different things, then probably the part-time is okay. But if you're somebody who just wants to focus on one thing, then the full-time is better. And again, the full-time is riskier because you're giving up your job and your income and you don't know what you're going to do afterwards. But, if you're applying to any number of schools, one thing that they always publish is the percentage of students employed after graduation or 3 months. And those numbers are pretty darn high. I mean, one school might have been Vanderbilt, I saw it was like 99%. And so chances are you're going to end up, you're going to be okay or whatever. But you do have to kind of go through that risk and that time of exploration. So again, that's a little different too. If kind of more like, hey, I just want to take these classes, I want to get the MBA and just kind of plow through a part-time MBA program is fine. If you want to go on like almost a retreat of like discovering who you are and what you want to do and what's your style and just take a pot, then the full-time program works really well. But people say with the full-time, it's better for a career switcher because you typically have an internship and you can try out a company where you don't have that with part-time. But I wouldn't discount or count out the part-time program to do that because you're meeting people from different companies all in the same room, you're building that network. And so you can change careers and change jobs and industries in the part-time program as well. I separate the part-time from the executive. So that's where I see the age matters. A lot of times in the part-time, like the evening and weekend programs, there are some people who are just like 1 year out of college. I mean, there's some early people, but the environment is different because you're going to have people like that, but then you're also going to have some people who are like, 30 years after graduating who are like, hey, I've got a family. I can't apply to a school on the other side of the country and, get my MBA and do all that. I will do that well. So you're going to have a mixture of different perspectives in the classroom from people who are just really recent out of undergrad to people who are more experienced and do that versus the executive program is going to be much more strict on the, 5 to 7 years of not only work experience, but leadership experience. And I want to also mention too, I think some people kind of shy away from the executive saying, I'm not like a vice president in charge of a whole department and all that. But I remember when I worked in executive programs, recruiting and admitting somebody who was a paramedic, for example. And so, there's all sorts of different ways you can be, an individual contributor leader, so to speak, in your job. So, but the full-time programs tend to, it's almost like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. It's like, it's like you have to have some experience, but if you have too much and they're worried about recruiters and placing you afterwards to keep up that 99% career placement thing. So I always think there's more latitude with the part-time MBA program, whatever years work experience you have. Whereas with the full-time, it's like, okay, do I have enough that I'd be like, it's sensible for me to do it now and they'll see that? Or am I over too much for they'll be afraid like, hey, a big consulting firm is going to hire me because I'm like 10 years of work experience, so to speak. Yeah, because it's a different decision-making process. And typically for the full-time program, it is much more competitive. That doesn't mean that it's not competitive. I have a client, for example, who just got waitlisted on a top executive, and again, I want to protect confidentiality, so I don't mention school, but a top executive MBA program. So it's not a shoe-in by any matter of means, but by and large, you really have to differentiate yourself with the full-time program, whereas the part-time and executive programs, the concerns are a little different. It's not, if I'm the admissions officer, it's not like, hey, is this person going to get a job afterwards? Am I going to be able to place them? Is the career office going to get mad at me? It's like, why the heck did you admit this person? I can't get this person a job. Versus the part-time and executive is like, okay, can this person balance full-time, part-time studies with working, with perhaps a family? And that's the thing. I mean, even the letter of recommendation, or one of the requirements for the Wharton Executive MBA program, is an endorsement from your manager that you will be able to do this and have the time. Because the last thing the schools want to do is admit people and then have them like drop out after. It just creates a whole bunch of work and going through the registrar's office and all that. So they really want to make sure that before they let you in, that you're going to be able to balance that and have the time to juggle, all the different balls, for example. And so it's a different advising in ways in the full-time program, because it's like, okay, you have a 6% chance of getting into Stanford. Okay, what can we do to make you stand out? Versus the part-time program of, okay, not going to be worried about career placement, and they're not going to be worried about like your test scores as much. I mean, you have a lot more latitude with executive assessment, which is an easier test. Although full-time programs are starting to bring that in, like NYU Stern. I had somebody who the first year they opened up the executive assessment, he applied with that. He wasn't doing well on the GMAT. I'm like, Stern accepts the EA and they're the first class, you would be the first class. Why don't you try that? And now he's a second year student in the program. So it's some ways it's just a little bit more latitude. They kind of especially with executives, they're kind of like, yeah, it's been a long time since you've been in the classrooms. We're not going to worry about this grade, as GPA as much as a full-time program. So just the odds are, again, when you're, I mentioned Stanford, which is, I would say, the hardest full-time program to get into. But even so, most of the schools, they're 20, 30%, acceptance rate, and there are a lot of people applying. Whereas the part-time program, the admissions rates are a lot higher. I mean, they're like, I would even say, again, except when you go into the very, very, and the people who work with me who are applying to like executive programs are applying to the very, very competitive ones. So so I can't speak to them in terms of their acceptance rate, but by and large, they're like over 50%. It's much easier to get in. But again, they're looking for different things that you have to kind of pass through those hurdles. So, if I were somebody, for example, who was like, hey, I want a Kellogg MBA and I can go part-time or I can go full-time, then you're going to have an easier time getting in as a part-time MBA student. Doesn't mean that you can just do a kind of like 5-minute application and just like write any thing on the essay and you'll get in. I mean, you still have to do the work, but the odds are just more in your favor. It's more holistic. There's greater sensitivity to having diversity in the classroom. So I was just talking to somebody recently who's a first generation college student, and and that's something that's very appealing to schools because they do want those different voices in the classroom. So I would say there's in some ways, again, the test scores matter, but I don't think they matter as much because they want to know who you are as a person. I have never worked with, and I've never seen somebody saying, hey, I want to apply to Wharton because I want to work on, Wall Street and make tons of money. So they're really looking for people who are going to make a difference in the world. I mean, the mission for Harvard Business School is, I think it is leaders who make a difference in the world, or Yale is, leaders for business and society. So they're really looking at what you've done in terms of your extracurricular, your volunteer work, and just what your values are, who your character is. And I think that is a lot more important than I don't think that was considered as much years and years ago. I think to really understand, every school is unique. Although sometimes it doesn't seem that way. If you look at websites, it's like, we have a collaborative community. I'm like, everyone says that. But I think it's really studying the school and what they're looking for and seeing where you align and fit into that. So for example, if you're somebody who really thrives in an environment where you love case studies, like having a whole bunch of, case studies of companies and where the protagonists had to make a difficult decision, whether that's a CEO or an executive, or maybe going into a new market, or maybe the economic conditions changed and they had to do something like that, then if you're applying to Darden, for example, you want to show that you're somebody who's going to thrive and excel in the case study learning environment versus, say, for example, Michigan Ross, which is all about experiential learning. I shouldn't say all about it, but they do have an emphasis through their MAP program where you do a lot of experiential learning on the things. So I think it's really showing who you are authentically, and actually, and then matching it to school. And I'm going to share my formula that I always tell my clients. What you're trying to get across is that Rick plus insert school equals the future, and that's what you're trying to really come across. So it's really showing you who you are, being authentic, being vulnerable. I think people are often scared of doing that and I think one of the biggest challenges, I think, for prospective students and missed opportunities is because they think they're applying to such, difficult schools to get into, and they're looking for amazing people, but they just have to present the sanitized version of themselves. And like their essays are like Harvard's is, what else do you want us to know about you? And it's like, well, I did this and I did that, and I did that, and I'm like, nah, they want to basically say, hey, there's some things that I've been working on that I need to get better at, and I'm hitting a brick wall, and as a result, I'm somebody who can't, like somebody could say, I'm not somebody who can think off the top of on my feet or off the top of my head. And so I really need this education. So I have a faculty member or professor call on me and do a cold call and just basically say, so Barbara, what do you think about this? Because I need that practice in a safe environment. Because I remember one time I was with my boss and a client and I completely messed up, and that's where I think people would be like, I don't want to share that I messed up or whatever. But again, that's where you just really want to show your growth, your potential, own things that you maybe haven't done well in the past, admit you need to work on, show that self-awareness, and and present that to the committee. Because if you're a sanitized version, everything's great. First of all, you're probably going to have an ego that they're not going to want in the program. You're not going to have that self-awareness, and they definitely sift out for that. But also, there's nothing like, why even go here? Like, what can we do for you? Like you've got everything. It's like, it'll be like Mark Zuckerberg saying, I'm applying on things I want to learn how to start a business. It's like, you don't need us for that. And so I think that's where it is. Just again, nobody's perfect. Everyone has challenges, own up to them. Don't be worried. The former, and so I'm going to stress this, that this is the former, not the current admissions dean at Stanford, said your essays should be such that if you accidentally print them out on a printer at work, you break out in a cold sweat and you run to the printer to grab them before anyone reads them. Now, I'm not saying that today is the philosophy, but nonetheless, it's, again, and actually I talked to somebody who was at Harvard, who I knew through another kind of circumstance. We both were in China together, and he graduated last year from HBS. And I said to him, do you mind? I'm curious. What did you write for your essay? I'm just curious. I won't share it with anyone. I just want to read. It's like, I can't send it. He goes, I didn't even share it with my close friends. And so I think, again, it doesn't have to be some tragic or sad story or, kind of like writing a letter to Oprah or anything like that. But I think, people are kind of like, they can be really stiff and really kind of like, this is really serious. I have to answer the question, and no, be yourself, show who you are. We've got a circle of friends and peers doing this where people say like, I was convinced you'd get into Harvard and why didn't that happen? Or this person was so amazing and, I just don't understand or whatever. And I even remember, again, to protect confidentiality, the former admissions head of another top school said, we get it wrong. And he said, there are times when, somebody will apply, we won't accept them. They'll apply again, we won't accept them. They'll apply again, we won't accept them. Finally, we'll take them, and they do great. And we're like, why don't we take them the first time? Again, you're dealing with human decision making, which has its flaws and is imperfect at best, and also it's not unilateral. It's not one person; it's a committee. So sometimes somebody can advocate for you, but another person won't. And what is a power play? I've been in admissions committees. I see how those work, and so there's a lot of, I don't want to say politics because that makes it sound like not, serious and intellectual. I mean, it very much is that way. But sometimes, again, it's who has the power, in that circumstance or whatever. And so, there's all sorts of different outcomes. I never even knew this industry existed, back 10 years ago. I just happened to meet somebody who was doing this, who went to my undergrad alma mater, and she told me about it. I'm like, oh, that's cool. So before that, I would have thought like, no, like, why spend that money? everyone knows I love shoes. I'd be like, I'd rather spend money on new shoes than spend it on something like this, but that's me. But I have seen, certainly with the people that I've worked with, and I even have had conversations with my fiance where I'm like, don't you think like this person, if I hadn't worked with them, like I'm just trying to make it sound weird, don't you think they wouldn't have gotten in? He's like, no, they definitely would not have gotten in without you. And again, a lot of it is the essays, the resumes, how you present yourself, thinking about it from your own vantage point versus thinking about it from the perspective of building a class. And, again, those filters of, we don't want anyone who's going to be disruptive, who's not going to be a good team player. So, this thing on the resume that basically says I, that doesn't sound like a team player. Let's not do it that way. But I'm even kind of have evolved going from that stage to not just being in or not in, like accept or deny, but even waitlist. Like there are people I've worked with who I don't think would even get on the wait list. And you could be like, well, that's no good. Like wait list doesn't get you in, but it can. It's like you're still in the running. So like if I can help get you, considered or get you an interview that you wouldn't have gotten before, then you're in a stronger place. And once you're on the wait list, sometimes you have to wait a heck of a long time, more than any of us want to do. But at least, you've made your progress. And so that's where I think an admissions consultant can help. I think one of the challenges is we're a big industry. We all have different personalities. We all have different ways of giving feedback. When I give feedback on essays, I put a lot of like smiley emojis because I'm like, oh, how would I feel if I was writing all the stuff and somebody was like, that's not the right way to do it or whatever. So I'm very sensitive. Some other people are more direct. Some people I know of consultants who will be like, I won't work with you because I don't even think you can get admitted. That's not how I am. I'm like, everyone deserves a shot in life. I'm going to be your lawyer. I'm going to take whatever I have and we'll do our best case and see what happens, that kind of thing. But yeah, I've, somebody I worked with first round got into Harvard, but didn't get into Columbia. And then like, that doesn't make sense, that kind of thing. So again, you're one of the other admissions head from another top business school said, what applicants don't realize is there's a whole bunch of different factors. It's not just your application. It's what are the strategic objectives of the school. So again, if you don't fit that kind of profile of like, maybe, another school said, hey, we want more people. We don't get many people in manufacturing. We want more manufacturing people. Well, like if you're another consultant, that's going to be even harder than if you're somebody applying from the manufacturing industry. But I would actually go to the point now of saying I would not encourage anyone to apply. And when I say top school, I don't mean just like the top 7 or whatever, but I just mean really any of them without having an admissions consultant just go through that. People will often, which is great, have students look at their applications, and it's great, they got through, but they haven't built a class, and they haven't not looking at from the perspective of like a whole bunch of people applying and trying to, get through that way. I think that the neat thing, the positive side for people thinking about getting an admissions consultant is how much help do you want? And I think there's a budget for that. I know one of my peers who does it really small. She's like, hey, even 15 minutes, I'll help you with something. I know people on the other end of the spectrum. It's like, I only work with you if you apply to 5 schools and, spend, 5 digits kind of thing. My philosophy is like, tell me what your budget is, tell me what your time is, and we'll do as much as we can. I just did that with somebody just now where I'm like, okay, there's a lot for me to look in. I only have an hour. So I'm going to pick the things where I think is going to have the most bang for the buck, is going to move the needle the most. And we're going to focus on that. And I'm not going to focus on the, something really minor. So I think it's really, interviewing them, finding somebody whose personality is a good match for the process. Some people are super structured too. And they or they have a huge consultancy with lots of team members, and they've all had different roles in admissions firms, admissions offices at different schools. Some people like that. Some people are like, hey, I want the flexibility of working with one person and, maybe not being as structured. And so figure out what works best for you and then, find the good fit, the good match for that. I just love giving people the opportunity. I think it's such a transformational experience. So I really love working with people, particularly had a hard time or challenges in life. Maybe they're a single mother and they've kind of, had to work while raising their kids, and now they want to do a program on top of that. Or maybe they had, a challenge undergrad with, a difficult semester, emotionally, and so they didn't do well. And I really like, if somebody's perfect, has perfect GMAT scores and everything perfect, like that's stuff, you know what I mean? It's easier for me. The chances are that they'll get in more. But I really like giving people chances who wouldn't have, otherwise wouldn't have a chance, and just who are very, again, just like anyone else. You want to work with people who are nice, who are, reasonable. Nobody wants to work with somebody who's like, hey, you know what, I need this done in an hour and you need to drop everything and do that. So that's the, I'm super responsive, but there comes a point for that. So anyway, so that's kind of the people I like to work with. And to get in touch with me is probably my website or LinkedIn. I'm always on LinkedIn. So people look me up on LinkedIn. I have a lot of connections, crazy amount. And I'm always talking to people, even some people I don't end up working with, who are like, hey, Barbara, I just have a quick question for you. I'm thinking about applying. What do you think? And if it just takes 2 seconds, I don't mind replying. If I get tons of them, I just don't have enough time to reply to all of them. Or my website, which is MBA360admissions.com.